Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Jennifer Boozer, owner and founder of CannaBama in downtown Mobile. We are located at 558 St. Francis Street in downtown. Our telephone number is 251-255-5155. You can find us at cannabama.com. And then you can find us on Facebook and Instagram under Sweet Home CannaBama. We broadcast live every Monday night right here on the radio. We are America's only cannabis radio show. In case I never said that before, pretty confident now that I've checked it a bunch of times and can't find anybody else to prove me a liar. To the best of my knowledge, we are the only radio show about cannabis in America. But we're here every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central. And we are live streaming, of course, on social media as well. Let's get this show on the road. We have some current events. Nothing too much going on this past week. As far as legislation goes, no bombs dropped. Everybody had favorable outcomes, actually. And I just want to let everybody know Labor Day weekend is coming up, and we're going to have a Labor Day weekend sale event. We haven't even decided on all the sales, but I'm going to post the details on these pages on Wednesday. We're going to do some free gifts with purchase. We're going to do some buy one, get one items, and maybe even some early bird sales hours where if you come in the first couple hours of the day, those people will get a special discount. So that will be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, into Monday, and we are going to be open on Labor Day, regular hours, 10 to 7, for all the people who were last minute. We opened on 4th of July this year, thinking, oh, well, a few people will trickle in, and we really had a pretty busy day. So we will be open for Labor Day, and so we want to see your pretty faces. I think the ladies from the station are buying their new root beer in 6-packs. It's quite the hit. We can't keep the drinks in stock. One thing before we get started, I've heard something profound, and I just thought it was worth repeating. When I was watching Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s speech about suspending his campaign and all that, I was listening, and the one thing that he said over and over in different interviews is the most profitable thing in America is a sick child. And I think it's refreshing to finally hear someone who is in a higher up government position actually admit that. Because we all know it, and I've been saying it for a long time. Everyone in my industry does, but it's true. You are not a patient; you are a customer, and no one is making any money if they tell you to change your diet and walk 30 minutes a day and go home and be well. So I think that the most profitable thing in America is a sick child is a sick statement, but it is very, very true. Pray for our nation. So let's go ahead and get into our topic tonight. I want to introduce our guest tonight. Our guest is the president of the Kentucky Hemp Farmers Association. Martin Smith is a pioneering agricultural entrepreneur and advocate with deep expertise in industrial hemp cultivation and CBD oil extraction. As the founder of the International Pharmaceutical Extracts LLC, Martin has been instrumental in helping farmers transition from traditional crops like tobacco to industrial hemp, all while championing legislative changes to support the industry. Martin continues to lead efforts that make a significant impact on the agricultural and cannabis sectors. Martin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's been a great introduction. You've really nailed. What do I got to say next? What can I say next? But no, thank you for having me. And it's good to hear. Like you said, I want to reflect back on your profound statement about, a Kennedy. Kennedys have been well known for their love for country, their love for the worker, their love for what's right. And
right, civil rights too. They were big on civil rights too, human rights.
Well, when you say they, it's a family,
right?
It's an American family that we all resonate with. Several gave their lives with the ultimate sacrifice,
That's right.
And so it's a family, and family is the most, in my opinion, the most powerful unit as far as guidance. How do you guide him? And I need answers. I call my dad.
Right.
And
exactly.
And when I find the answers on my own as a man, I find them from what my dad taught me. and what my
Right. Oh,
uncles
I'm
taught
46 and I still want advice from my mom. And I wish my dad were alive to give me advice.
me.
Or to come
Yeah.
kick some butt when I need butt kicked.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
let's
take it
go.
for granted.
Let's get to know you, Martin. Tell us who you are and how you ended up in hemp and cannabis.
All right. Well, I'm an Arkansan. As you see, I'm a Razorback fan. I'm an Arkansan, and I'm in Kentucky, so that's one of the biggest rivalries in basketball. I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but
No, but you might have heard the phrase "roll tide."
what you said, right? So anyway, I grew up in Arkansas in the Ozark Mountains, a little place called Shirley, Arkansas. I graduated with 13 kids. I was on a bus. Yeah, I was on a bus for about an hour and a half one way just to get to school. That's how dense the population is. My family are my dad's family. He and their family are Native American. My great grandmother's full blood Apache, and so they traveled with the the fruit harvest, the vegetable harvest. That was my family's background, and a lot of that has to do a lot of what they culturally taught us and was how to live off the land, because we lived in such a dense population. And so living off the land was something that brought not only a physical nutrition, but a mental nutrition to my person. And I come to realize that early on, hunting and gathering was a daily routine, whether it be a root or a bark or a berry or,
Right.
Whatever it took for us to survive in those places. And most people don't ever leave those places when they grow up there, because it's kind of just a culture where you're a part of what is, and because you're a part of what is, it's a part of who you are.
Right.
And it happens all over the world, but this place, Ozark Mountains, pretty it's a real dense people. And like I said, we just learned how to live off the land. And my dad and my mom my dad and my aunts and my grandmother were all the wise folks with plant medicine and how to use, how to make poultices and how to make salves and creams. And so when we needed something, when we found something, we always preserved it for when we needed something. So we'd be rabbit hunting maybe, or squirrel hunting in the spring, and come across, an elderberry bush that's fixing to bloom, and go, okay, we got to remember where that was at for when the fall comes, when we can hunt elderberry. Or we'd always find a place where mushrooms were that were of a certain, whether it be a giant puffball mushroom, a sheep's head, so I just grew up in all of that as a backdrop to what made me who I am today and what I do today. And so I graduated high school, joined the military, became a quartermaster, served aboard a USS Kincaid, a Sprint class destroyer out of San Diego, and really just got thrown into from the mountains right into boot camp. And you can just imagine an old hillbilly. Wow. Yeah, I had no cultural. I never really got on blacktop to do two things. I went on blacktop for blacktop to go to school and blacktop to go to church. So I really didn't. Right. So and the world wasn't connected, where I come from, at all, so my sense of
that's just country. That's way out in the country. I think in Kentucky, don't they call them
hollers? And we got a few hollers where I come from too, and that's why I get along with Kentuckians so well. We got that awareness about what a holler is and how to use a moonshine still, and what mash is. And anyway,
I always say my mother's side of the family in North Louisiana, my dad's side of the family in New Orleans, I definitely thought that groceries grew in the grocery store, because there was no mom. I do remember my mama growing tomatoes one time, but I was just a total concrete kid,
Yeah.
And so that is so foreign to me, and it's so fascinating that people even now still live that rural. And I know it to be true because I've met so many people through being in this industry myself, that there's so many people that come from that farming background, and it's generation after generation. It's an incredible thing that people corporate America has really tried to eliminate the American farm family. And so it's good to see that some people are still sticking it out. You know, we got to eat. And the way food is now, we don't know who to trust. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk some more with Martin Smith. Stay with us. I can't. Welcome back to the show, everybody. You're listening to Sweet Home CannaBama right here on FM Talk 1065 every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central, and right here on social media streaming live. We're talking tonight with Martin Smith, who is the president of the Kentucky Hemp Farmers Association. Martin, we were getting to know a little bit about who you are. Now, tell us what you do.
Okay. Yeah, I saw our company, United Global Co-Opportunities, who is the holding company for International Pharmaceutical and Extracts. That's pharmaceutical with an F.
Right.
And so what we do is we work on innovative technologies and associated to bringing new commodities to the U.S. We've got a few commodities we brought out of Africa that Ford and Toyota here in Kentucky are using, and we're working with producers here in Kentucky to integrate those crops. How I got my background in that was working in I pastored for about 12 years. And when I moved to Kentucky, I took a church that in 2002 during the tobacco buyout, the tobacco settlement. And so what that was is they were basically phasing Kentucky farmers out of growing the commodity. And so in doing that, they were charging a tax that was being charged to the smoker, who, that monies would go back and be a part of helping them to come along. So in my church was the state workers and as well as the tobacco farmers. And so I got to hear both sides of how legislation was being passed, what was being, displayed. And at that time we were in looking at doing a building project for 30 years, and the tobacco farmers were losing their their tobacco base, and which was of a good amount of income for them, and they were using that for tithing and for those responsibilities. Right. So once they were losing it, it was really putting a struggle on our ability to fulfill that mission that we had. And so I got into looking for new commodities. And so from literally from the pulpit,
wow.
Yeah, from the
That's
pulpit.
great.
Challenged with, the word of God. It says he created this for the healing of the nations. And,
Yes.
when he created it, there were no nations. It was created if you read the Bible story, it was created for man to have. And so I was challenged by that, while also looking at my background in plant medicine, or plants that we use for, I always say plant nutrition instead of medicine. Medicine puts you in,
Right. We
but
believe medicine is food, food is medicine.
nutrition is medicine. I mean, you
Yes.
look at the inner city, and you look at how the lack of nutrition has created a place where, if people could get balanced in their nutrition, I think we would have a much greater opportunity to solve a lot of our social issues and things.
Well, especially because your gut health being your second brain and directly affecting your mental health. And that's how we deal with each other, how we process information, how we handle trauma and stress or joy and good things. And that's definitely a problem.
Well, I'll put it like this. I just showed you this drink that I'm drinking right here, right? Ain't that beautiful? It is made, that I went and gathered those today, and here they are. I gathered these ingredients. This is sumac. I don't know if you could see that sumac, and this is elderberry. And I gathered mimosa blossoms earlier in the spring, and I'd make a tea out of that. And mimosa blossoms are good for just your mood altering. I mean, it literally puts you, like right now, I am feeling very relaxed, not simply because the mimosa just puts that relaxation on you. But how many people know that?
Well, and that's not a mimosa with champagne and orange juice,
Mimosa,
right? Some
mimosa tree.
you got to tell them.
Yeah, it's a tree, mimosa tree. So that has a pink blossom on it, and it is very, very good for. But my point to that is how many mimosa trees have you think we've driven by, and complaining about the mental health and scenarios, and talking to, so my interest, when the Lord challenged me to do something with these tobacco farmers, and then challenged me in this cannabis space with the endocannabinoid system, which God created. And so inside of that endocannabinoid system is homeostasis, because when God created us, he said it was good, which what that means is that it completes his will. And so when that endocannabinoid system, I did all of my research that I'd been working on. I started working on incarcerated veterans who are dealing with PTSD, because I couldn't imagine for myself someone who suffers from having a collision at sea and dealing with, the loss of a dear friend of mine, actually my mentor in the Navy aboard our vessel. And so dealing with all of that and understanding that I wasn't, we all know, when my dad said it best when I came home from the Navy, he said, "You're not the same." And he knew what that was, because he knew when I was in my balance before I left. And so, yeah.
He knew you as God made you, because he raised you.
Sure. That's why daddies and mamas are so important. That's what I started earlier with, just thinking about anyway. So for myself, it was more on the lines of getting plant medicine avenue, and cannabis was the buzz. At the time, I was working on another commodity that Ford and Toyota are using here in Kentucky. And I was working on that commodity and wasn't even thinking about cannabis. But once the Lord impressed on me that, this was his plant and he created it and he said it was good, and he told me, "Martin, find the good in it." And that's what he kept saying to me over and over and over again. Find the good in it.
Teach people what, and I know what you're saying. I can't articulate it exactly the same, but I know what you're saying, because God gave me the name CannaBama and this vision, and put a fire in my belly I had never experienced before, and it was so new to me. But I knew that the only way that I could do that is by teaching people what it is and what it isn't, and how wrong we are, and teach them. If I could teach them scientifically, make sense of what it even is, and then how it works, that I could show people that this isn't what anybody ever thought it was. None of us,
Sure.
and there's so much value in that. And I believe that if the church and the recovery community would let me teach them, let me show them that same thing, let you show them that same, find the good in it, like you said, I think it would change a lot more people's lives.
Yeah, I've had, I mean, since the CBD revolution, I call it, all the other, back in the day, the hemp farmer, people was pushing hemp, didn't like CBD and its notion because it was taking away from what they felt like was the industrialization potential of the commodity, and really
and you could, I mean, that's fair, because that's all anybody talks about is CBD or THC. Not a lot of people talking about hemp fiber. That's what part of the reason for the show is, to expose people in Mobile, Alabama, and the Gulf Coast region and this state to people like you who are doing something, that's, here's this same old devil's lettuce, but now we're, wait, he's a pastor, like,
man, we sure did
wait a
give him
minute,
a whole
maybe
lot of
there's
credit.
something else to this that I don't understand.
We sure did give him a whole lot of credit, old devil.
Yeah.
Well, I ain't giving him no credit. I ain't giving him no credit. And,
I should do it less. You're right. No, that is not the first time I've heard that. My sister-in-law always says, "Don't advertise for the enemy."
There you go, man. I have no visions of what he is, because in the end, he ain't going to be in God's vision, and that's the only place to be, right? I want to be where he's seeing me and seeing what I'm doing, and that's really that's how I got out of the pulpit and into writing legislation, and I'm an oath taker, so I took the oath to serve my country. It's across my chest right here. It's
I think that the pulpit isn't the right place to teach the plant. I think because of the modern church and the way things, the smoke and the lights, and the way people are so sort of just tired of the traditional American church and the way it's kind of fallen to the wayside. I don't think that the pulpit is the place for us, for people like us who are believers, who also advocate for the plan and use the plan, and we're trying to bridge those two things. I think that you leaving the pulpit and going out into, boots on the ground where you were with those farmers and your legislators, and bringing sort of that pulpit to them, and bringing, because this is a hard thing. We've got the whole world against us, and people don't understand it. And it's been really, really hard. I'm sure it is there, the same as it is here.
I've had so much fun.
Have a certain depth of faith and some hope,
I've had so much
even
fun.
be able to get out of bed in the morning, and people sense that.
I've had so much fun representing myself as a citizen advocate, as somebody who has a testimony, who has, the Bible says in the end days that our testimony is going to be, why? Because it's going to be the only truth,
That's right.
And,
I have mine.
Right. And so being a veteran and a pastor, it opened the doors for somebody to believe that I wasn't trying to fortify a position that they were uncomfortable with.
That's right. You come from two very conservative, very strict and rigid portions of society, the church and the military. So I imagine that did give you some legitimacy when speaking to people, because of just who you were in those titles, and I think that helps. I mean, I don't have any of that. I just have this show, and apparently because nobody else wants to do one, that kind of makes me a little bit unique. So it does give me the opportunity to speak to people and be in situations like you. Like, I would have never met you, and I've had the best time getting to know you. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk more with Martin Smith about THC. Stay with us.
Your camera and your mic.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Sweet Home CannaBama right here on FM Talk 106.5 every Monday night at 7. We are talking tonight with Martin Smith. Martin is the president of the Kentucky Hemp Farmers Association. And Martin, what
topics. I'm going to let you decide.
I want to hear what you did a presentation about the percent of THC allowable in the plant and the definition of industrial hemp. So your presentation strongly advocates for increasing the allowable THC limit in industrial hemp to 1%. We all know it's 0.3% by dry weight. Can you explain how making it 1% could impact small farmers and the overall industry?
Yeah, for real. So I started that initiative back in 2018, I believe it was, and wrote a bill here in Kentucky asking for our state to elevate it in order to, a couple things, protect our farmers from regulatory damages associated to having too much THC in their commodity, and to also increase the potential elevation of CBD, so we would get past this threshold we have with about 8 to 9 to 12% CBD in our yields. So when you think about that, you got to think about it like corn. When we go out in our fields and we pull an ear of corn to see what our yield's going to be, we're counting the amount of the kernels that are in a ring, in order to determine how much yield is going to be on our field, whether it be 14 or 18 or 21 kernels on that ear. That tells us what our yield's going to be for that year. And so if you think using that same philosophy and you add a 1% threshold to the THC threshold, that gives us a better yield on our crop, and we get more for it, and will put us in a advantage in the industry for being able to have a greater yield per acre. And therefore, if you're looking at CBD hemp and you're growing it outdoors, there's about 250 hours of labor in every 1 acre if you do it right. So that's a lot of hours in 1 acre, and if you can get the yield up like that, that is definitely a value added to our farmers and our producers, as well as it allows less biomass to have to be run. So now your input cost for processing goes way down, and because your yield's going to be up in your flour material. And then when you make another,
you get more flour from less plants.
Yeah, right. And then you make another, you make another product out of it. So your regulation, this is where we're working on and have been working on, trying to get the FDA to move on labeling and regulations on labeling, so that, we can convince our legislature that layer of protection, consumer protections, is valid from the, because we're already making concentrates and extraction. So
what difference does it make if it's in abundance after you squeeze the juice out versus being on the plant, and you can get more? There's more everything. There's more fiber, there's more core, and there's more seeds, right? If they're allowed to grow the plant longer, this is a triple the threshold.
Right. So it also puts a lot of takes the pressure off our genetics that we have based on stress variables. So if you have a drought year, or if you have a straight line winds, or you have a little, scenario with hail or something of this nature, the stress value of that will not raise elevate the threshold. So we could do that, but really I only did that because I was trying to really push the conversation to the benefits of doing it. And so, but really, if you really go back to where the definition of the 0.3 threshold comes from, these departments of agriculture are forced by the DEA back in the day to comply with the flour, measuring the flour. So where the 0.3 threshold come from is page 408 of the International Association of Plant Taxology, a 1976 research paper done. And that research paper concluded that in order to equally test the male plant and the female plant, right? How do you currently test the male plant? If I just grow a whole acre of nothing but males, how do you test that plant with the protocols that are there? So that's what the question was. And so they answered that by a 0.3 threshold of the young, vigorous leaves of the maturing hemp plant. That's how the testing is supposed to have went down. And if they'd have done that, we would
The
have had
leaves and not the flowers.
the leaves and not the flower. That's where the 0.3 comes from. It's
So
looking at,
why are we testing flower then?
because the DEA associated testing of cannabis to just the flower and
Right.
not the whole
Because
plant.
they can't grasp this concept we keep beating our heads over, that it's more than just smokable flower. It's
Yeah.
50,000 things.
But so
You know, I mean, they can't wrap their brains around that. I don't understand that. It's common knowledge.
it's just what's happened in time, and we have to
What-
accept time as
What is the significance of the 0.3? Do you know? Is that number some special number that means something,
so it
or
comes
is it completely just arbitrary?
it's an arbitrary number, but it comes from the value that they estimate it would be in the industrial plant in its industrial utilization before prohibition. And so they were looking at what would you find if you were to go into a traditional hemp plant. It would have, if you tested the male plant and the female plant, because you have to have a protocol for both. That's
Right.
equal for both, because it's hemp. And remember, hemp is not a thing. It's a legal term.
Right.
Cannabis is a thing.
It's just a descriptor. It's a descriptor based on that arbitrary percentage.
Right. And marijuana is not a thing. It's a legal
No,
term.
it's a slur.
It's a legal term and so in doing that, while I was elevating the 0.1 or the 1% is because I wanted to bring the mindset to the process that we can call hemp. Let's just do what we said we were going to do, and we're going to test the young vigorous leaves of the maturing hemp plant in order to determine for its arbitrary factors that it would have a 0.3% value of THC. If you do that, our hemp will be running somewhere around 3% THC.
Right.
We can
Right.
extract 3% THC with a value out of hemp. Remember, it's just a term. Out of a legal term that gives us enough THC to supply the medical markets, if that's the only limitation we want to produce in. What I'd like to see, right? So that is, why I chose to build that foundation with the legislatures. And, I got Rand Paul. He also introduced into Congress the 1% bill. I think he's done it twice now. So.
Right.
That's why, because I believe that we need to set a threshold or for plant medicine. And if we can do it through extraction, and do it through this process here, we can then, identify what's medicine and what's nutrition. And
Right.
CBD is a factor of two. It's nutrition because your body is producing it, and therefore you're putting the nutrition of production
Right.
back in your
You're
body.
just replenishing what your body's already used up.
Right,
That
because
it made.
yeah,
Just like every other thing.
right. So my role in setting this up is the next evolution of our discussion will most likely pander into this space, and that is, how do we get the FDA to do something that is going to be beneficial to the nutritional factors of what cannabinoids bring to the equation? And so my next evolution of this discussion is to bring it into the ingredient status, like nicotine, caffeine, sugar.
Mhm.
Give us let us have a labeled value of what the nutritional values of these cannabinoids are for supplemental nutrition.
Yeah.
So that's the evolution, the building blocks that I've been working on to establish, how do we get to this place where we're being kind to nutrition, plant nutrition.
Yeah.
And when I say by being kind to it, I mean, it's there trying to be kind to us. And
Right.
we're being, mentally lazy,
Right.
in our pursuit to really find what is of value here. And so
Let me ask you this before we end up with another break. Being able to raise that percentage to 1% is going to have a huge financial impact on these farmers, right? Because if you're at 3 times a smaller risk of getting your crops burned, then insurance will be easier to get, right? And loans, because they know there's this tiny threshold. And if you go over it a tiny bit, they're going to burn the whole field, and no one wants to insure that. And no one wants to give you loans on that. Is that correct?
And nobody wants the liability risk of putting a seed in the ground that's going to bring them a felony charge.
Well, that's true too. The farmers would probably be shy because that is true. I mean, you hope that if that were to happen, all they do is burn your fields,
Right.
you know, and they don't also put you in federal prison for 10 years. And I think that even that is silly. If someone's gone to the trouble of getting a license and they know the state can come and check on them anytime, and they've gone over by a fraction, those people should not be charged as if they're growing weed in somebody's backyard in the shed. You know, that's not the same thing.
But you put 250 hours of labor into an acre or something, and because it went over a 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10,
there should be an allowable use, maybe not for consumable products, even though we know they can extract whatever they want out of it and make it as potent or not as they want, but maybe at least be able to use those crops for fiber and hempcrete and things like that, wood, instead of losing the whole crop. Just not allow them to extract from it for consumable reasons, but still be able to use that commodity part, you know?
Yeah, no, I say extract it and let the label be the requirement. Where we make the consumer protections is at the label, and if it's not what the label is, now that's where you have a real grievance.
Right.
The farmer's putting a seed in the ground. An environment could change it. There's so much of things that can affect it. You're talking
right, and we're talking most of this hemp is being grown outdoors, correct? Not indoor.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. So there's all those factors. You're right. Okay. So in just a moment we're gonna have to take a break, but in just a moment we're gonna come right back with Martin Smith and talk about the concept of inherent sovereignty. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking tonight on Sweet Home CannaBama with Martin Smith. He is the president of the Kentucky Hemp Farmers Association. Martin, we were just talking about your quest to have the THC limit in industrial hemp be raised to 1%. And before we move on to this other topic, is there anything else you want to make sure that you got to say about that?
You broke up there. What was the end of the question?
I was just saying, is there anything that you would like to make sure that you got to say about that before we move on to inherent sovereignty?
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is the term circumventing the intent of Congress. And what that means is that when you bypass the intent of Congress in order to implement regulation, when like, for example, in this specific place where they said, they got the arbitrary number of 0.3% THC by dry weight. We had to argue at that point, I had to argue, salts, isomers, salts of isomers, acids, they were all weighing in on all of that, that was weighing in on that 0.3. And we worked with, the University of Kentucky, and we worked with the Mitch McConnell to get the, those things excluded from that weight. All of that, that's just a super minute. I mean, we had to go back to Congress and ask them to support us to get those thumbs off the scale, and just get the THC molecule by itself.
Right. Well, and we're talking about such a small amount. Like this is
trace,
if at best trace amounts. So the difference between 0.3 and 1% is negligible compared to the other 99, right? I mean, this is insane, microscopic amounts of chemicals we're arguing over, right?
Right. There's no value to extracting THC out of it. Even if you smoked it, whatever, there's no value, no matter what format you use to get that THC molecule out of a 0.3% material. There's no value to extracting the THC period out of it. Circumventing the intent of Congress by only weighing the THC from the female bud, 10 inches of the bud, is circumventing the intent of Congress, because the 0.3 arbitrary number came from the young adult leaves, maturing leaves of the hemp plant.
Not the flowers. Yeah. That's crazy.
And so that word circumventing the intent, that phrase circumventing the intent of Congress, is what you would argue if you were to, bring this as an argument to, your local, whoever your regulatory compliance is.
Right, the ag department or whatever. Do you think that it would be a good idea to separate consumable hemp and the industrial application hemp, like food and fiber and all of that, and kind of have different testing standards? Because I know that was one of the things that kind of was being discussed for the Farm Bill, is let's test the consumable for the amount of THC, but who cares how much the fiber plants have? It's never going to be crazy. You're never going to smoke it. And what does it matter if we're not even making a consumable product?
That makes too much sense.
And it's like, if you use the fiber and process it down into a shirt eventually, will the shirt make me high? I mean, these are the crazy questions. Will I test positive for THC wearing a hemp shirt? It's like, people do not understand how tiny an amount we're talking about.
Well, it's the same thing that, when you started this conversation with RFK, it's the same thing when we talk about toxins in our food. It's the same thing. All of these elements that we're unaware of the value of, or the damage that's being done, autism being where it is, and, all of these other degradations in human, mental capacities, and I mean the mental state of man, and those type of things, it's all encompassing.
We're too busy trying to keep up with whatever's popular on the algorithm every day to even question what our food is made of, what it's been exposed to, what we're even taking from our doctors. We don't care. We're too busy being entertained and looking for instant gratification everywhere we go, and no one sees the forest for the trees, and it's really scary.
I think but with what you said earlier about a major politician like the Kennedy, name, and he ran. I mean, he gave a good run for president, and I think he's probably one of the most presidential speaking individuals as
He's
far as
the only one talking about anything really important.
so with that, it's, my hope comes from, I was just no hillbilly coming off the farm, and I knew a few things about plants, a lot of things about nutrition and how to provide for my family and how to look after people who I care for, and
and give back to your community. That's what I mean. It goes hand in hand.
Right. So I think we're further down the road than maybe we sometimes. It's hard to look over our chin, and we got to, it's hard to look over our chin, but I think we're further along. I think pushing this ingredient aspect of these cannabinoids and saying, look, we need this is a nutritional aspect.
Right. Let's look at them individually and not wipe out the whole plant because of one thing people are afraid of.
Yeah. So, but that's my pathway to my work is trying to get all plant, nutrition on a label. I mean, this sumac, elderberry, mimosa tree ought to be something everybody has access. I went outside and picked it on my way home.
Right. Or be able to barter with your neighbors to trade for what you do have.
We do that already.
You've mentioned that this inherent sovereignty and local resolutions are key to gaining necessary protections for the hemp industry. Explain that. Explain inherent sovereignty.
Yeah. So inherent sovereignty, meaning that you inherited when you got here, there were plants here, there were nutrition. And so in the Bill of Rights, it literally says that we are all endowed by our Creator. That endowment is what you're inheriting. Right. And so that's where the inheritance part of inheritance is the things that are here and fortifying the human experience prior to you or prior to government or prior to, the human existence. And that's why we are all equally endowed to them. And so inherent sovereignty is you recognizing that you have sovereignty and you have the ability to communicate. And that's where I think resolutions to your local government, because Bill, who's the judge exec, because you went to Sunday school with him and on and on and on. And so there's a level of, my mom, my aunt, we love our county, we love our community. And so that is why I say that's the best place to start these dialogues. And it's a very effective place. Sovereignty, I mean, your individual sovereignty is what gives you everything you have to not be property of the government. Do you understand that? Not being property of the government and having the ability to articulate the inheritance that you have in this space, using your sovereignty locally to discuss these things. Not only is it your sovereignty, nor is it not only your inheritance, it's that person across the table that you're with, that that has the power to help you communicate to the legislature. And so what I start off with the resolution is to teach everybody in our industry how to get the best results. And I wrote a resolution up that basically asked the county judge exec and those that are in charge of the county to sign on to a resolution to ask our legislature to elevate the definition of industrial hemp from 1% for all the reasons that we've discussed here today. And
Martin, I hate to cut you off. We're about to go. I would love for people to know where they can follow you. Where can they find you? If they want more information, get in touch with you, help support or collaborate in other states, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me. My Facebook page is the best place to find me. I'm not a out there kind of guy. I'm really knuckles on the ground every day. So just find me on my Facebook page. Is at Martin Smith. I'm wearing a cowboy hat like this. So my picture.
Yeah. And you can see that Kentucky Hemp Association on there. Thank you so much, Martin, for being on the show tonight. I appreciate your input and what we've learned here tonight. We'll see you guys next week and every Monday night right here on Sweet Home CannaBama. Good night.